The crazy wisdom of the three adepts. Drukpa Kunli, the Tibetan divine madman, 1455 to 1529, once attended Dochopa, the great yearly religious festival at Samye, the oldest Buddhist monastery in Tibet. This festival was frequented by a large number of lamas, professors, spiritual counselors, monks, and literate laymen from all over Tibet. When asked by these staid and stolid pillars of Buddhism what ritual he had come to perform, Drukpa Kunli replied that he would undertake a spontaneous vow reformation, a traditional rite that renews the vows binding the demons subjugated by Padmasambhava, the founder of Tibetan Buddhism. He began in an original but orthodox manner. Indivisible bliss and emptiness, ultimate awareness renews the bond with the Lama and deity. The light breath of the vow violators of the 10 spheres renews the commitment of the protection and guardians. However, Drukpa Kunli was not one to let slip any opportunity to instruct those around him, shaking them out of their complacency and conventional religiosity and confronting them with the reality of their shortcomings. His recitations soon took the form of a humorous caricature of his listeners as he pointed out the ways in which they were bound by desires as surely as Padmasambhava had bound the demons. Double and triple offerings for provost and steward satisfy monastic officials, an unending string of dry words satisfies the ambition of scholars. Superficial flattery satisfies politicians and superiors. His own talk, though it fall on empty ears, satisfies the garrulous head of the family. Sugar and butter sweets satisfy fat mothers. The undiscriminating bachelor satisfies insatiate women. Snot, phlegm, and mucus satisfy makers of spittoons. Such unorthodox and spontaneous behavior was recognized as a valuable means of spiritual instruction by the Tibetans, who appropriately termed it crazy wisdom. Drukpa Kunli was an initiate of the spiritual lineage established by Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, and Milarepa, all of whom were also crazy wisdom adepts. Such adepts often worked outside the boundaries of conventional spiritual practice. Not content to engage rituals for the sake of future enlightenment, they turned the attention of those around them to the present truth, revealing the limitations and assumptions that obstruct present realization. Such crazy wisdom is little known in the West. Our conventional orientation to life is one that seeks safety, comfort, predictability, and reasonableness. We are creatures addicted to meaning, for whom the search for meaning has become a more or less constant activity. Meaning is the tool by which we seek happiness and defend ourselves against the threatening unknown, enclosing ourselves in a world of safe and repetitive experiences. Therefore, we see meaning as the single most important attribute of any object or event, and we chronically limit our awareness to objects and events to which we can ascribe meaning. All else either goes unnoticed or is brushed aside as nonsense. Yet, as Master Darfri John observes, we are all participants in a vast realm of nonsense, and we are struggling to make sense of it by attaching ourselves to selected or experientially preferred phenomena. But the truth of the matter is that we are terrified by our vulnerable mortality, and the infinite chaos of the world process is not a condition into which we tend to be joyfully and ecstatically surrendered. We are thrown in a swirl of countless possibilities and ever-shifting forms, none of which has any obvious or intrinsic meaning. Even science, that final bastion of logic and rationality, has come to the dead end of order and meaning. In the subatomic realms of quantum physics, even apparent matter is revealed to be a chaos of relationships and possibilities, far too fluid to pin down or understand with Aristotelian or any other logic. Hence, more and more scientists are recognizing the limits of their own discipline. As Sir Arthur Eddington, astronomer and physicist, declared, "Something unknown is doing we don't know what." That is what our theory amounts to. It does not sound a particularly illuminating theory. I have read something like it elsewhere. The slithy or slithy toves, de gyre and gimble in the wabe. The God-realized adept mirrors the chaos of nature to our fear-frozen intellect, standing free of the limitations of body and mind, the addiction to the senses and the need to make sense. He blasts our conceptions, always confronting us with the aspects of life that we would deny. Thus, the adept is an offence to our buttoned-down, middle-class, left-brained conceptions of life. He appears unreasonable, eccentric, even mad, but his is the madness of infinite compassion, as Master Darfri John confesses. The compassionate Mahasiddha does not do for others everything he can do within the bounds of propriety. The compassion of the Mahasiddha is such that he will do everything, whether in the realm of propriety or not, for the sake of awakening others. Therefore the crazy adept looks crazy. The story is told that Ramanuja, a Hindu Vedantin, 1017 to 1137, once visited a certain spiritual teacher, having heard that he possessed a particularly potent secret teaching. Before instructing Ramanuja, the teacher explained to him that the knowledge he was about to impart was an esoteric secret of the highest degree, and if Ramanuja should ever reveal it to another, he would surely suffer in the hell worlds. The teacher then went on to say that the teaching was so powerful that simply to hear it once was to be guaranteed salvation. After receiving this teaching, Ramanuja bowed and then hurried straight to the roof of the highest building in the marketplace. From this conspicuous podium, he bellowed the secret teaching at the top of his lungs to everyone in the crowded marketplace. When the outraged teacher demanded to know what Ramanuja was doing, he replied, "If so many can be saved in the expense of one, this is wonderful indeed." While there is no such salvatory formula, the aspirant in the story does reflect the heroic nature of the crazy adept's relationship to his devotees. Having rid himself of the illusion of bondage and confinement to a particular body-mind, he then surrenders his life completely to struggle for the sake of others. His life becomes a kind of sacrificial theatre in which he willingly undertakes any trial in order to awaken those fortunate enough to contact his influence. In India, such a free adept is called an avadhuta, or one who has shaken off the egoic point of view. One such avadhuta, Swami Nityananda, would often wander around naked, died 1961. On one occasion he was accosted by the local citizens who were irate at his nakedness. They reported Nityananda to the magistrate, who tried to convince him to wear a loincloth. But Nityananda, using the incident to make a lesson about the transcendental unity of all apparent phenomena, responded, "Cover what? With what?" Finding it useless to argue, the magistrate ordered the police to tie a loincloth on Nityananda. 3 or 4 times they tried, but each time the cloth slipped to the floor. Embarrassed by his public display, the magistrate called one of Nityananda's devotees, who was a tailor. The devotee approached Nityananda reverently, imploring him to wear the loincloth for my sake. Only then would the garment stay in place. In this humorous manner, Swami Nityananda demonstrated that he was free of all conventional constraints, but that he was indeed submitted to his devotees. The insane compassion of such adepts is termed kyo, K-Y-O, by the Chinese. Startling and irreverent humor is prominent among Zen Buddhist masters. Hyung Po, the 9th century Zen master, once addressed an assembly of monks, many of whom were respected and experienced practitioners, with the following remarks. "You people are just like drunkards. I don't know how you manage to keep on your feet in such a sodden condition. Why everyone will die laughing at you. It all seems so easy, so why do we have to live to see a day like this? Can't you understand that in the whole empire of Tang, China, there are no teachers skilled in Zen?" By such comments and by his own example, he attempted to provoke in others the ego-shattering realization that transcends all concepts, meanings, and attainments. The criticism of a God-realized adept is not a conventional effort to urge others to self-improvement, no matter whether their improvement is couched in practical, moral, or spiritual terms. True God realization transcends the one who could be improved. As Master Darfri John once put it, why act like superior beings? Act like free beings. The Rinzai Zen sect, which traces its lineage to Huang Po, is particularly noted for kyo behavior. Its practice is marked by beatings, shouting of nonsense syllables, and the use of various unorthodox techniques to stop the mind. Among them, the humorously impossible but dead serious riddles called koans. Its founder, Rinzai, exhorted his followers, "Kill the Buddha, kill the patriarchs." The Taoist mountain sages also exhibit the crazy wisdom attitude. Witness the whimsical sage Chuang Tzu, who engaged in this humorous exchange with Tung Ku Zu. "This thing called the way, where does it exist?" Chuang Tzu said, There's no place it doesn't exist. Come, said Master Tung Ku, you must be more specific. It is in the ant? As low a thing as that? Yes, it is in the panic grass. But that's lower still. Yes, it is in the tiles and shards. How can it be so low? And it is in the piss and dung. As Westerners, having been educated to worship reason and rational order, we may find it particularly difficult to understand crazy wisdom and the teaching methods and behavior of crazy adepts. Yet, there is a little-known tradition of divine madmen, even within Christianity. Simeon of Emesa, Thomas of Caesarea, Andreas of Constantinople, Lucas of Ephesus, all canonized saints and divine madmen, or fools for Christ's sake, were all living examples of the foolishness of which St. Paul spoke in his first epistle to the Corinthians. For instance, Simeon of Emesa, the 6th century Eastern Orthodox saint, used to relieve himself in public and would often walk about naked, throw stones at passers-by, crawl on his belly, and associate with harlots, though without having sexual intercourse with them. He was once beaten for throwing nuts at people praying in church. He regularly drank wine in taverns and often provoked violence or was himself violent without apparent reason. He also happened to work miracles, and these were often flavoured with humour. He was buried as any madman, but when shortly afterwards his coffin was reopened to grant him a decent burial, his corpse was not to be found. The great Western Church Father, St. Francis of Assisi, 1184 to 1226, was also something of a wise fool. He referred to himself and his pupils as jesters of the Lord, who practiced spiritual joy. Although he never followed the excesses of obscenity of the fools for Christ's sake in the Eastern branch of Christianity, he did make a point of transgressing certain rules for the clergy and laity. Thus, on one occasion, he preached stark naked in church, provoking shock and mockery. Understandably, solid citizens are traumatized and outraged by such capriciousness. But why are they shocked and offended? They simply feel threatened, and they have good reason to feel threatened, because after all, their all-is-well universe is at stake. By inclination, we are loath to reconsider the shaky premises upon which our lives are built. Basically, we are afraid to look at life as it really is. We want everything to be harmonious, orderly, in place. Yet, no matter how we order our lives, deep down we all have the feeling that we are disturbed. That feeling is the beginning of wisdom, and it is that very feeling that the adept plays upon with his criticism and his wild, unsettling behavior. As Master Darfree John expresses it, human beings have always been struggling to realize another condition, because they intuitively know that there is something about their present state, no matter how orderly it may look, that is insane, disturbed. There is an inherent disturbance associated with the most orderly kind of ordinariness. Most people can acknowledge this. The conventional state of the ego is a kind of insanity. This is why, since ancient times, human beings have been devoted to realizing some other kind of condition, even though they might not be able to name it yet. Everyone is motivated toward release by the inherently disturbed sense of self. In fact, this is our great advantage. This is the native city of all beings. We already transcend the ego through our disturbance. It is not something we should be suppressing, therefore. We should not let it make us insane, but we should use that energy, use that motivation. From a talk by Darby John. Needless to say, the means by which the free adept stirs up our basic sense of disturbance and puts us in contact with the motivation toward release are not necessarily orderly, pleasant, or polite. As Master Darby John points out in a passage which was inspiration for the first part of the title of this book, as long as you want to be a gentleman or a gentlewoman, you can carry on your endless karmic destiny in limitation, but you will never live the life truly. You will piddle around in dimensions like this one, which are nothing but excrement compared to the divine light. But the Lord is wild. The Lord is a vast fire, not a gentleman. As soon as the Lord makes his contact with you, he works for your dissolution. The talks in this book by Darby John represent a sampling of the play of the Western crazy adept with his devotees. In the first several talks, Master Darby John deals very specifically, even bluntly, with the way we cling to rationality, meaning, orderliness, and logic, trapping ourselves within a mind-forged prison. He uses every means at his disposal, including coarse and startling language, shouting, direct questioning of basic premises, outrageous humor, and carefully constructed logic to argue, tease, and shock his devotees out of their conventional complacency, their conventional frame of mind. He does this so that his unspoken, ceaseless transmission of the enlightened condition might find an opening past their habitual defenses and into their intuition and life. There is much in this book that is disagreeable, even aggravating to the ego, and rightly so. The ego must be unsettled, dislodged from its pedestal for spiritual life to be possible. The ego is naturally resistant to self-transcendence, which spells the end of egoic existence, the end of a delusive identification with the puny body-mind and its concerns. Recognizing this, the discriminating reader will be able to use these talks as a revealing mirror. If they shock, disquiet, or irritate him, this always points to an area of egoic attachment, defense, or aversion in the reader. To see this represents a real opportunity for a spiritual practitioner to discover the hidden workings of his ego. For those readers who choose to approach this book with a conventional mind, we wish to reiterate that Master Darby John's intent is not to shock or offend, but to instruct, and not merely to instruct, but to awaken the reader beyond himself or herself. For, like three adepts before him, Master Darby John does not merely talk about truth. He is a living agent of truth. Having utterly transcended the bounds of his own apparent body-mind, he has become a transparent vehicle to the one being that is his identity. He lives as that all identity, the radiant transcendental being, which is the ultimate reality of all beings and things, because there is no ego to diffract or conceal the transcendental radiance. his body-mind is a presence, a transforming force that can be of inconceivable value to the spiritual practitioner who makes himself sensitive to it by way of heartfelt surrender to the divine. As Master Darfree John has explained, his speech and his writing carry mantric force, or the ability to act as a direct agency for spiritual transmission. If we are receptive, if we can go beyond but not bypass the intellectual exercise of comprehending and tussling with Master Darfree John's verbal argument, and allow ourselves to be drawn into the intuitive feeling dimension, these talks offer the possibility of a real participatory relationship with a living adept. The talks in this book represent a specific mode of Master Darfree John's communication, the mode of ecstasy. This does not mean that these talks were given while Master Darfree John was hearing voices, or having visions, or speaking in tongues, or even necessarily residing in any altered state. Here, ecstasy is used in the root sense of the Greek ecstasis, to stand outside oneself, to abide beyond the narrow and false bodily and mental identity of the ordinary individual. In other words, Master Darfree John exists in no state whatsoever, having completely transcended the body-mind, while paradoxically fully incarnating the ultimate reality. He is literally a human agent of the transcendental being. The ecstatic confession of identity with the divine has been the confession of adepts of all times. It was Jesus' affirmation when he said, "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father." It was Krishna's declaration when he said, "I am the origin of all. From me the whole creation proceeds." It was the Indian sage Ashtavakra's ecstatic proclamation, "Oh, marvellous am I! I adore myself, who, though with a body am one, I have neither coming nor going anywhere outside myself, and encompass the universe." The Sufi Al-Hallaj stated his case most simply, "Ana Hach," as H-A-Q-Q, "I am God." When the sixth Karmapa incarnation, the 15th century Thongwa Dondon of Tibet, was still an infant, he was asked his true identity. His reply, "I am the unborn, free of all names, places, and I am the glory of all that lives. I shall lead many to liberation." In the following passage, which explains the second part of the book title, "I Am That One," Master Darfree John describes his paradoxical condition. "Then, mysteriously in the Vedanta temple, I realized who I am. I simply entered into the disposition of the one who is being the body-mind and stopped being Franklin Jones. Others continued to refer to me as Franklin Jones for a while, but I was no longer that person, that self, that I. I was the one who existed as Franklin Jones, the one who lives this body-mind. Now, when I use the word I, or when I tell you to remember me, I do not refer to the limited, separate personality of the born one, Franklin Jones, that fictitious character. The psychophysical being that sits in front of you. Even though this body-mind is the vehicle of my existence, I am simply the one who is actually living this body, who is actually conscious of this mind and this place, who is the prior one. This condition is tacitly completely obvious to me. It must likewise become so obvious to you. You must inhere in that same one. The one you realize in this way is the same one to whom I refer as myself, and to whom you will ultimately refer to as yourself in ecstatic speech. It is not that you are somehow located deep behind the me of ordinary reference. That secret self-sense that you may feel at times is just the body-mind. But when the body-mind recognizes its true position and yields its independent motive, its self-illusion and self-contraction, then the one in whom the body-mind inheres is revealed. Not only does that being awaken as the body-mind, but then only that one speaks and acts through the body-mind. In other words, become the vehicle of God, be the vehicle of the divine. Thus, one day Franklin Jones responded to the call of his name and to the questions that were usually directed to him. And in another moment, that same Franklin Jones ceased to be present. You also must die in that fashion. That disappearance is ego death, when it is literal and true. If I ask you in this moment who you are, you will define yourself as the body-mind. You are the one whom we name Ralph, or Peter, or Martha, or Frank, or James. You are exactly that one, that person, no one else. The conventional self-definition is the limit of your presumption and aspiration at this time. But if you will consider my argument, then someday someone may speak to you, and the paradoxes of your speech may reveal that only the one who is actually being the body before us is speaking. How that becomes true is shown in the deep ecstasy of our perfect surrender into the heart, the living one. The heart is the infinite and radiant consciousness that is the very nature and condition of all beings and things. Although intuited at the heart with a capital H is not inside body and mind, nor located in any place in relation to body and mind. The body and mind arise within the all-pervading condition, capital C condition, and they are modifications of it. The spiritual transformation of Master Darthy John was spontaneously perfected by grace while he was sitting in meditation in a small temple on the grounds of the Vedanta Society in Hollywood, California, on September the 10th, 1970. Heart Master Dar refers to the name he was given at birth, Franklin Jones. And Adidar has often said Franklin Jones was a fictitious character. We have to realize that God is living our body minds, that God wants to live our body minds. And then our body minds are simply ecstatic, without any condition whatsoever, simply ecstatic. Da, da, da. That's what it is to be a crazy wise person. You are more sane than the sanest conventional person. Sanity is God. Crazy wise.